There's a whole world out there of 8 billion people, and only 330 million of those live in the US. And the rest of the world may not have access to the US stock market or any stock market at all. And so you can't, for those people, you need some type of tool that can give you access to savings technology that is more globally available and permissionless in nature. And Bitcoin solves that problem for so many other people, even if you don't find it as valuable for you in your kind of privileged situation there in the US.
Trey, you made it out of the cold.
I did. First time in El Salvador. It's beautiful. Absolutely love it.
You don't think of living in the South that you need to flee the cold, but I guess that recent cold front has hit everyone.
It has. I left my poor wife and kids at home, and they're enduring the cold, and it looks like it's going to be a snow day in the Atlanta area tomorrow. So
that's crazy. It's snowing in Atlanta, and California's burning down.
Yeah, and anywhere that it's typically warm in the winters, like Atlanta, the whole city shuts down when there's snow, and we're getting something like 3 inches.
I bet, because probably nobody knows how to drive on the snow there,
yeah,
right?
And there's no salt trucks or any kind of road clearance type of vehicles out there, or very few. And so you just kind of have to wait it out. But luckily, you wait a day or two, and it's in the 40s or 50s, and the snow melts away, and it's all good. But I think they'll have a good time tomorrow playing, making, sledding and whatever.
Make little snowmen and do some sledding.
Yeah, doesn't happen very often. My kids are 7 and almost 9, and they haven't really had much experience in the snow like I did growing up.
Plus, if you're a kid, if they're closing school for the day, that's a reason to celebrate it.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we're glad you're here in warm El Salvador.
Yes.
You're staying here in El Zonte for a couple days, I think?
I am, just down the beach.
Yeah. And you got out in the warm water yesterday?
I got in the warm water yesterday. We were just diving under some waves and getting tossed around a little bit, which was fun. And that black sand, getting caught in my hair a little bit. I was like, man, what is this? But no, it's beautiful. Really nice.
I can't believe this is your first time coming to El Salvador.
I've been thinking about it for a while and looking for a good opportunity.
You're kind of slacking on that as a Bitcoiner.
I know. I didn't know what to expect, to be perfectly honest, but and I haven't really seen much yet because I just got in yesterday. But I'm really looking forward to seeing a little bit more of the country. And like I said, the beach is absolutely beautiful. So you can't really go wrong there.
Yeah.
And then, I'm down here to play a couple rounds of golf and hang out with Bitcoiners, and, should be a good weekend.
So I hear you and your buddies there at Unchained are the inspiration behind this golf tournament that Stacy and Max are throwing.
We are. It was an interesting development of events there. We got together. We're golfers. It's myself and Joe Burnett and Rocky Wold, all at Unchained, and we play a lot of golf on our own time. And I've kind of made it a point in my own mind to mix these love of Bitcoin and golf that I have, and find a way to incorporate the two together so that I can play more golf because I'm working so much and trying to make this Bitcoin thing happen.
Then you can say it's a work event.
Exactly right. So, and things are coming together on that front. And this is one example, right? But we just wrote this fun piece, Golf and Bitcoin, the greatest games, and it was just meant to draw some parallels, some synergies between golf and Bitcoin and what they have in common. And the 3 key points there are:
quick interruption with an exciting announcement for you guys. We have the Plan B conference coming to El Salvador. For those of you who have gone to the conference in Lugano in the past, you know what an amazing job they do. So I'm super excited. They're bringing it to El Salvador this year, January 30th and 31st. So we got a little promo video to show you guys, and then we'll get back to the podcast. But as you can see from the video, there's just a number of the top speakers from the space that are going to be coming to speak. We're also doing a full Spanish track, and I think this is the first time any conference has done like a full Spanish track alongside the English track. So we have 2 stages that are going to be Spanish only. We really want to focus on having an impact on Latin America, so I'm excited that they're doing that. The other thing that they're really focusing on is circular Bitcoin economies. And obviously at Bitcoin at Beach, that's what we're all about, is circular Bitcoin economy. So we have actually been very involved with helping them put on this conference, and very much encourage you guys to make it part of your schedule for this year. We have a discount code for you also. So if you put in Bitcoin Beach, you will get a discount. So make sure you get your tickets now before they go up in cost. And then also make sure you get your accommodations, because it is going to be packed in El Salvador during this conference.
Got to have a low time preference when you're playing golf. You've got to put in proof of work. Like there's no shortcut or easy way to get good at golf. You just got to be out there grinding and hashing away. And you got to make sure you don't make mistakes, like selling your Bitcoin or or losing it, in a boating accident or whatever. And so, we just thought, hey, this will be a fun piece to write, and maybe we'll get a little bit of fun accolades, and got posted to Bitcoin Magazine website back in June, I think it was, of last year. And almost immediately, Max reached out and said, hey, I want to do this golf event in El Salvador, and I want you guys to run it. And we're like, really? Okay, let's make this happen. Let's do it. And we had it was like a month later, we were in Nashville for Bitcoin 2024. And my friend Chris Bobe had run a golf event on the Wednesday before.
We actually had Chris in here in the studio yesterday.
Did you? Okay, so you know Chris, obviously.
It was the first time I met him, but yeah.
It was,
yeah.
okay, good. Yeah, so Chris, he ran this great event on the Wednesday ahead of Bitcoin 2024. And he had told me about it, I don't know, maybe 6 months before, a year before. And I was like, hey, let me know what I can do to help just like get the word out. I'll see if we can like pump it on socials and make sure that it's successful for you and we can drive people's interest in it. And he did such a great job. And I'm sure his wife Frida had something to do with that as well. But they did such a great job putting together this event, and we really enjoyed it. And so when it came down to like figuring out the logistics of the Max and Stacy Invitational here in El Salvador, I didn't want to do that work, and it's like, here we're sitting with this great couple of people who already have experience doing this, already have some connections and can make that happen. So we kind of like made that introduction and helped kick that off, and they've really deserve all the credit for putting the event together and making sure all the details are done in a really excellent way. And I'm really looking forward to see how it turns out.
I mean, it's much better to just be able to show up and golf and have fun than have to worry about all the headaches and the things.
I did what I do best, which is
I
did what I do best, which is make some connections. And we brought Unchained as a headline sponsor, and just help kind of push in the right direction and provide some initial like thoughts and feedback on how we thought the event should run and that kind of thing. But I mean, they really deserve all the credit in the world for putting together what I'm sure will be a great event. And it's helped them kick off, their efforts with Bitcoin Sports Network. So, really.
So you haven't played that course yet?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't.
I mean, I'm not a golfer, but I did go out there and play with my dad this year. He came down and he loves the golf.
Yeah.
It's a tough course.
I've heard.
Yeah.
I've heard it's unique in its design.
There's some that you definitely need to know where the pin is, because they'll tell you like, okay, hit it over there. You're like,
yeah. Well, it's good that we'll have a practice round tomorrow before the main event on Saturday. And like I said, I haven't been able to play as much golf as I would like, just given how busy I am with work and kids and all that stuff. And typically my best golf is played, 6-8 weeks after I've taken a break there. So it's going to be a great round tomorrow on Friday, and then the next day we'll see what happens.
All right. Yeah, I'll be there for the event, but I took one of the non golfing slots. The golfing slots all sold out. Like
40 minutes. Like,
I mean,
insane.
it was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of them were taken from like all the great sponsors that we've been able to pull together to support the event. And then the rest of the field like just went, basically instantaneously.
Yeah, I was shocked that, usually these things you at least have a few days to get your tickets, but those were
Yeah. And I had no idea what to expect. If it was happening in the US, I would have thought like, oh yeah, like very quickly, like it's going to be very easy to sell out. And I think the events that Bitcoin Sports Network is putting on around some of the other conferences this year, they're going to have no problem selling tickets for those. But being down here and like the travel that would be involved from people, coming from the US or wherever else in the world, I just didn't know how that would land. And turns out people want to come to Bitcoin country.
Well, I think a ton of people that like you, it's their first time coming down here. In fact, I have to fly out Sunday to go speak at something in California, and it was hard getting a ticket getting out of here because I think a lot of people are leaving on Sunday. They're coming in for the tournament. So I was shocked that I had to pay significantly more than I usually pay for a ticket to get out. So, it's definitely you guys are pumping up the tourism industry here in El Salvador.
It's good. Well, El Salvador is doing a lot of good stuff for Bitcoin. Seems like we should support it.
Yeah. So I want to hear the backstory of Unchained. Obviously, I've heard your guys' name since forever. I mean, you guys have been around forever, and have been one of the few companies in the space that haven't had any big debacles along the way. At least that I'm aware of.
We certainly hope to keep that streak going.
So love to hear a little bit of the history of Unchained, and for viewers that don't know what you guys do, talk about the services you guys offer and how those have kind of developed and morphed over the years as you guys have seen different needs in the space.
Well, Unchained was founded in late 2016, and kind of early 2017 is when the first products hit the market, and it was really built around the concept of Bitcoin-backed lending. And, in Joe Kelly and Drew Bonsall, who are the two co-founders back then, in their efforts to bring a unique product to market that really aligns with Bitcoin's core functionality, they adopted multi-sig, multiple keys protecting Bitcoin at the same time. So you could eliminate the issues that come from having a single counterparty there, the lack of transparency or verifiability that the Bitcoin that you're putting up as collateral for a loan isn't just being sent off somewhere else that you can't track. And so, in 2022, years later, we saw the effect of a lot of those same Bitcoin-backed lending or Bitcoin yield type companies who are taking in Bitcoin from their customers and rehypothecating it, lending it out, doing who knows what with, right? And it's a black box to the end client or the end customer. And ultimately, like, we're basically one of the last men standing on that front because we approach it in a fundamentally different way, which puts Bitcoin's native properties on a pedestal and want to make sure that we're building with that in mind, right? Like, Bitcoin is a totally different asset and has different properties, and you should take that into account when you're building financial services around it. So that's really how like Unchained got its start, and then we developed and morphed into a more full-fledged financial services company that offers custody, offers IRAs and other kind of traditional financial products, trading, that are all built on that collaborative custody model using multi-sig and multiple keys and that kind of thing.
So I know we saw in the last year there was all these other lending platforms that kind of blew up, and in fact, I know a lot of Bitcoiners that lost a significant amount of their stack because they had put them into these yield products that, they could never tell them how they were actually yielding off of it. So what is different about Unchained, and how did you guys come through that without any of those issues?
Yeah, well, for the first thing is that we don't offer yield on your Bitcoin because, again, like, in order to generate that yield, you've got to put it at risk in some other way, which requires lending it out or There are some other more sophisticated ways of generating yield, like using options or something like that. But it creates, it certainly is putting that Bitcoin at risk of being called away.
There's
And
always some risk. If you're getting paid, you're taking some risk.
yeah, exactly right. And the way that these other lenders were doing that was very not transparent, right? Like you didn't know as a customer, as a client of theirs, what was happening with that Bitcoin. It could have been lent out once or 10 times, and you have this like daisy chain of risk out there that's completely not transparent to you. You have no idea what kind of counterparty risk you have. The way that we approach the loans is using multi-sig and collaborative custody to give cryptographic verifiability and transparency to our clients, in the sense that they hold one of the three keys that is protecting the Bitcoin. So the way that multi-sig works is that you develop a quorum of private keys that are all protecting the Bitcoin at the same time, and you need a subquorum of those in order to move the Bitcoin out of this multi-signature wallet. We call this a vault at Unchained. And what we do is have three different keys that are protecting the Bitcoin. And in a pure custody model, somebody who comes and says, hey, I've got, X number of Bitcoin. I want to make sure I have the best possible protection for it, but I want to maintain full unilateral control over it. Those clients hold two out of the three keys.
Okay, so this is your custody product.
So this
that
is
we're
the
talking.
this is the custody
let's
product.
talk about the lending product first, and then just since we were already talking about that. So,
Yep.
so tell me how the lending works.
So in the lending product, instead of holding two out of the three keys, you can't do that, right? Because then you would have full control over the Bitcoin and the dollars that we are lending you. But you can hold one key out of the three, and Unchained holds the second one, and then a third-party key agent holds the third key. So what that does is it gives you cryptographic proof that the Bitcoin is sitting there within this multi-signature Bitcoin address, within this vault, and hasn't been moved. We have no ability from a legal standpoint.
So you haven't loaned it out to somebody else.
Yeah. Exactly right. It's sitting there purely as collateral for the loan. And because we are not the only custodian for that Bitcoin, you develop some fault tolerance into that model in case something were to happen to Unchained, something were to happen to the client's key, or something happens to this other key agent. The Bitcoin hasn't been lost. The other two keys can come together to spin the Bitcoin and move it in the direction that it needs to go in that particular situation. So that's how multi-sig and collaborative custody solves this problem of making sure you don't lose the Bitcoin. And in the loan context, it gives you that verifiability directly into that collateral. So you have the best possible chance that you're going to get it back at the end of the loan term. And of course, you still have the risk that the price is going to move very significantly against you. But we are originating these loans at 40% loan to value. It's very conservative there. And
what threshold does it have to drop below for you guys to liquidate?
Yeah, so this is easier to talk about if you invert it. So 40% loan to value is 250% of collateral value versus the principal. And when it drops to 150%, that's when a margin call process starts. And we're asking our clients to address that margin call by either sending in more Bitcoin as collateral, or paying down a portion of the loan, or surrendering some of that collateral to be sold to cover the principal, to bring that collateral to principal ratio up to a certain level there, so that it would clear the margin call and you're back in good standing there.
And I'm assuming you guys, as long as the market's like not moving drastically, you try to give them a day or two to be able to do that. But if the market's moving too fast, then you just have to liquidate.
There are a couple of different levels to that margin call process and liquidation process. The first one that I was just mentioning at 150% is a 48-hour window of response time. And if the price continues to drop and you get to 135%, that's when it will accelerate to a 4-hour window. And then we are taking liquidation steps starting at 110%. So, we start very conservatively. We have a custody model for the collateral that is fully transparent and verifiable for our clients. The legal structure does not allow us to rehypothecate it, and we can't move it without, the client being able to see that anyway. And then our team and our operational structure is is extremely good. We're very communicative with our clients, and make sure that they understand what the situation is well ahead of the time that they would need to react to that. Make sure they understand what their options are and can help them through that process of maintaining that loan if they want to, or surrendering collateral, or whatever the case may be. To the effect that, in 8 years of operating at this point, we've not had a single principal loss for the capital providers that we work with.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a testament to the process and the infrastructure that we've put in place. And again, the fundamentally different way that we approach this type of product that caused so much angst and consternation for people who were using products that maybe give you a lower interest rate on the loan, but that lower interest rate is subsidized from the fact that
They're
the Bitcoin is being
hypothecating your
rehypothecated.
Bitcoin.
Exactly right. It's like, again, where does the yield come from? Well, in this case, it's where does that lower interest rate come from? And it comes from this rehypothecation process that was happening. And ultimately, what you thought was 6% interest rate turned out to be 106% interest rate because you lost all your Bitcoin.
So explain to me, I'd be curious, I want to know how that works with you guys, what the rates are based on. But from what I've seen, I still can't wrap my mind around it. The rates always seem very high for the collateral that you're putting up, not specifically with you guys, but just in general. I mean, you have this collateral that trades on markets 24/7 that, like you said, you guys haven't had any principal loss.
Yep.
Like banks loan on homes and things that they can take huge losses on, or small businesses, a bunch of things that are way more risky.
Yep.
But it seems like people have to pay higher rates when they put their Bitcoin up as collateral than even like a home loan. So explain that to me. Why is that the case? And how much is it for you guys? How is that set? I don't know if it has tiers.
Yeah. So the current structure of the loan terms right now is 2% origination fee with a 14% interest rate. So that comes out to 16.21% APR.
Okay.
You mentioned banks. Banks are in the very fortunate position of being able to print their own money. And we are not a bank, and we can't do that, right? So the interest rates that are in the market for Bitcoin-backed loans are really dictated by the cost of capital that we are able to source for the dollars that we are providing for these loans, right? And historically speaking, these are provided from private investors and asset managers and funds that have various levels of understanding of Bitcoin, and that certainly is growing over time. But suffice it to say, the massive ocean of capital that could, and in my opinion, will come in over the next, call it 3 to 5 years, has not yet arrived. And when that capital starts to seek the great collateral value of Bitcoin in terms of providing loans and that kind of thing, when the banks come to play and they have the lowest cost of capital on the planet, basically, right? Because they can print their own money. Yeah. That will drive interest rates lower, in my opinion. I don't have a crystal ball, but just stands to reason that as you get more interest in this type of a structure, as people start to understand Bitcoin as a pristine collateral asset and see an opportunity in the market to make this, this delta on their cost of capital versus what is out there for a Bitcoin-backed loan, you're going to start to see some competitive pressure
come down.
Because
it seems like a market dislocation right now, because I know people in the real estate business that they can get hard money loans for 14%, usually all day long. So, and they're putting up collateral that definitely has a lot more hair on it and a lot more risk. And
hard money can be in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% for some people.
Yeah.
So a 14%, interest rate is great. The other thing to recognize, if you're a real estate investor and you've got a property that you want to bid on or buy, you can actually get through a Bitcoin-backed loan process with Unchained in a very quick turnaround time. So you can act on that opportunity very quickly. You can access liquidity from an asset that you have on your balance sheet that is otherwise just sitting there. Earning the hurdle rate yield that Bitcoin has of 60%. And you can make a bid on that property, buy it with cash, and then go through the bank financing process at some point in the future to
when
bring
it's more convenient
to bring your interest rate down. And but that process of going through an underwriting process with a bank, that can take months sometimes, right? And it can be expensive and all that. So
and I'm assuming you guys
another
don't
tool to be able to do that.
There's no underwriting with you guys because you have the collateral.
There's no underwriting in that traditional sense, no.
So how long does the process? So say I want $1 million, and I'm going to put up $3 million of Bitcoin to collateralize that. How long would it take to?
On the neighborhood, in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 business days. Okay. $1 million loan is pretty routine for us. So that's definitely something that we can handle there. And I should wrap all of this around the disclaimer that we don't do personal loans or consumer loans. These are commercial Bitcoin-backed loans to entities in the U.S. I think we serve something in the neighborhood of like 43 different states. Okay. And they're for business or investment purposes. So if you're looking for a Bitcoin-backed loan to remodel your home, that's probably not an appropriate use of funds there. But if you are looking to make a real estate investment or, buy some other asset or, invest in a business or something like that, that would very likely be an appropriate use of funds for these loans.
And so does it have to come through like a corporate entity or?
Yeah, you would onboard a business entity, like either an LLC or some other type of operating business into a business account with us and apply for the loan from there.
I see. Mm-hmm. I see. Interesting. Okay, so that's one of your guys' products, and that was what you guys started with. Was that what initially?
That was what kind of kicked off Unchained into the marketplace, and then not too long after that, we started to recognize, or I should say, they started to recognize. I've been at Unchained for a while now, over 3 years, but I was not there back in those days.
Yeah.
They started to recognize that there's a market need for all of these clients who are accessing the Bitcoin-backed loans to actually have really good security for the Bitcoin that they're not putting up as collateral. And multi-sig and this collaborative custody model is a great solution for that. The people that I talk to on a daily basis, they're typically high net worth individuals or family offices or just people with a lot of Bitcoin, like a substantial amount of Bitcoin that they're worried, they're up at night thinking about what's going to happen to this Bitcoin after it 10x's in price. Like, I can't sleep. This is like way too much. I've got a ledger or Trezor in my desk drawer with this seed phrase. Like, this is like not working anymore all of a sudden. And so these people are coming and they're looking for really a solution to two main problems, which is, how do I not lose the Bitcoin while I'm alive? How do I make sure that like it can't be stolen from me, that I can't make one mistake and lose it? And then tangential to that, and very much related, is how do you pass it down to your family if something happens to you? And there's a title aspect to that question, which is, in your jurisdiction, how is the actual title of the Bitcoin going to be transferred to your heirs? And in the U.S., that's typically a will or a trust structure, or if you don't have any of those, you're going to go through a probate process.
Yeah.
And so the Bitcoin title can be transferred to your heirs, but Bitcoin doesn't know anything about any of our legal structures, any of the paperwork associated with that title transfer. You still need to have private keys that can sign a transaction to move the Bitcoin in the direction that estate plan has laid out. And so this collaborative custody model solves that problem very well by allowing you to essentially just make a copy of one of the keys that you're controlling in that 2 of 3 model, package it up really nicely, and give that to the executor of your estate or trusted family member or an estate attorney even. And the balance that's struck there is that you maintain unilateral full control over the Bitcoin while you're alive, but you've got a succession plan in place that does not embed trust in another individual. They only have one key, but they've got every piece of information they need to contact us and work with us to make sure that the Bitcoin can move as and when that time comes.
So they would have a key. The owner, the original owner that is leaving this to somebody else, would maintain a key, and you guys would have a key. Is that?
Yeah. So typically, if you're just thinking about an individual, you think of that individual as having 2 out of the 3 keys, and they're keeping them geographically dispersed.
Yeah.
And then you can make a copy of a seed phrase from one of those keys. That's what you would package up in a succession package that you give to an estate attorney or something like that. So it gives you a little extra fault tolerance in the model, because now you've got this one extra piece of information that can help you to recover access if something were to happen to those other 2 keys that you've got. But typically speaking, that inheritance package is something that you're not accessing if you need to move the Bitcoin. You want to still be in a position where, hey, if I need to spend Bitcoin for whatever reason, I'm moving it into a Bitcoin-backed loan, that you can sign with your 2 keys, or you can sign with just 1 key and ask Unchained to provide that second signature.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So do you guys, going back to the previous product, do you guys see a lot of people that, because they believe Bitcoin's going to continue to increase much faster than the 14% interest rate that they're paying, that their just plan is to never sell their Bitcoin, and they just keep borrowing against that to fund their lifestyle, and as Bitcoin price increases, they're able to pull more?
Yeah, it's the classic speculative attack, right? And it's going to be very interesting, I think, to see how that market develops over time, to give people more tools to that effect. As I mentioned, I think that the banks are coming over time.
Yeah.
I think NYDIG very recently was talking about their plans to open up more structures or more Bitcoin-backed financing opportunities or credit opportunities built within Bitcoin to do similar types of things. Was it?
I saw some announcements from some like mainstream bank recently that they were going to move into the market, I think.
Yeah, I'm blanking. Who's the guy? He spoke at Bitcoin 2024. Starts with a C. Help me out here. We need ChatGPT.
I don't know.
Anyway, they are talking about bringing like $2 billion into a Bitcoin-backed institutional lending. Say it. Cantor Fitzgerald. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for that. Totally blank there. So they're bringing, or they announced that they're going to bring $2 billion worth of capital into this market. I think, from my understanding, that is going to go to institutional players, probably like Bitcoin miners and other institutional investors who are looking for some leverage on their Bitcoin, or the ability to fund operating expenses or whatever. But yeah, it is absolutely going to be a popular way to realize some of the value of your Bitcoin without having to spend it.
Well, and
without having to sell it.
There's a huge tax advantage too that a lot of people don't realize, that if you wait till you die, your Bitcoin steps up in value as it's, if you have enough that you get into having, inheritance tax, that's another thing you got to juggle. But for people that are under that limit, you basically raise your basis in your Bitcoin, and as it's passed on to your heirs. And so that can be a huge advantage versus paying taxes along the way. Yeah.
I've talked a lot about this like speculative attack in some of the issues that I have for my newsletter, which is focused on financial independence and retiring early with Bitcoin. And, even something like a mortgage for people in the US who have access to like a 30-year mortgage at a fairly low interest rate, 5 to 7% or something, you're doing that same type of speculative attack or leverage, even though you're not actually leveraging the Bitcoin. In a lot of ways, that's a really great way to hold more Bitcoin, because you're not being marked to market on a 24/7, 365 basis. You're not putting your Bitcoin directly at risk for that loan. It's collateralized by your income and that piece of property there, which doesn't have a margin call process, let's just say. And you've got a lower interest rate and that kind of thing. There are a lot of different fiat tools out there that Bitcoiners should be aware of and be thinking about, in my opinion, to figure out how to incorporate this advantage that the system gives us if you know how to use those tools.
So you mentioned you have this newsletter, and I admit I have not read it, so I don't know what what is it. But you mentioned financial independence, retire early, and a lot of people know that as like the FIRE movement.
Yep, that's right.
Is that something that you've been a part of for a while? And I'm curious then to have this conversation with you. Why do you think that in that space, most of the people have this animosity towards Bitcoin. I feel like it makes so much sense. I mean, I kind of came out of that space also.
You did.
And in fact, the first podcast I ever did was a podcast called ChooseFi, which is a pretty big podcast in that space. We were talking about generously giving in life and not just saving, but also giving along the way.
Did you talk to them about Bitcoin on that, or was that
not
like
really?
prior
That was
to?
kind of pre for me when I
Okay.
was really, I owned some Bitcoin at that time, but I hadn't fully gone down the rabbit hole. It
Yeah.
was before we started the Bitcoin Beach project.
Got it.
I contacted them afterwards, like, hey, let me come back on, and
Yeah.
and they're like,
No, thanks. Yeah.
and so, but it's weird. There's all this weird animosity and like in that space, but. So I'm curious as to your take on why you think that is.
I think there are some people who are coming around and being a little more open-minded. I mean, after all, like you can't ignore what Bitcoin has done and the fact that it is widely being adopted and being talked about at the highest levels of the U.S. government at this point in time, right? And major corporations and all that. So at a certain point, like that number go up technology, it turns people's heads and they have no choice but to look at it. So I think we're seeing a little bit of that. I think the FIRE movement, historically speaking, has done very well with the strategy that they are employing, which is you save as much as you can and you, what they call invest it into the stock market, into the index, and that
or
compounds.
real estate.
Or real estate. Real estate is very popular. I tend to focus in my writings on the index fund aspect of it because in my mind it's a superior asset for doing that, and that's
a lot less work. That's
the experience that I have in how I started my FIRE journey. It's a lot less work. There are a lot fewer risks and that kind of thing associated with it. And a lot of people will compare the two. The extra returns that you get from real estate, forget about all of that extra like work that is associated with it, but the extra returns that you're getting from that is just coming from the extra leverage that you are taking on when you do it. Which again, like it's a good tool to have in your tool belt. You could get the same type of returns if you could put the same type of leverage in the stock market, and probably higher. But there is a margin call situation associated with that, and different trade-offs. But I think the people who are the FIRE practitioners, they're doing just fine in plowing money into the index fund, which is
living below their
historically
means.
speaking, compounding at maybe a slightly higher rate than their cost of living is going up. And because they're very focused on their expenditures, they are able to manage the cost of living increases relative to their net worth and these savings portfolios in a way that works. And in a lot of ways, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You've taken this like path forward, and it's hard to get out of that path when you've invested so much time and so many years in this methodology of doing so. And then add on top of that, historically speaking, the FIRE movement influencers, let's say, have been negative on Bitcoin as well. The very first issue of my newsletter was called "Why Bitcoin is Stupid," and it was directly calling out Mr. Money Mustache, who's a key figure in the FIRE movement that you probably know, who wrote this piece for his blog in 2018. I think it was January or February or something of that year. And it was right after Bitcoin had peaked at 20,000, dropped 50%, and was back up a little bit to like 14,000 or something like that. And he wrote this thing, "Why Bitcoin is Stupid. It's all the same FUD, Beanie Babies and tulips and all this stuff," right? Doesn't do anything. And so that's how I wanted to kick off the newsletter, was saying, I'm going to show you why Bitcoin is stupid, call this out, and that actually the stupidity of Bitcoin is the beauty of it, that it doesn't need to be smart. It actually thrives from being stupid, in that the rule set is what it is. It can't react to market demands. It doesn't react to what people want it to, who are in positions of influence. It just is. It's just stupid in that way. And you benefit from that stupidity by buying into a network that can't be changed, where the supply is perfectly fixed. And that is to your benefit because it will increase in value at a much faster rate because of where it is in its adoption curve and the fact that it's perfectly fixed.
Well, I think they can't pull back from history and see, like, they're in a unique time right now where just investing in the stock market has done really well. But if you look back, there's all these shifts that happen in financial systems where they only last so long. And we're in one of those shifts right now, and they can't see it because it hasn't happened in their lifetime.
Very, very true. The U.S. is in a unique position as well, and I think most of the FIRE influencers in that community has grown up in the U.S., where the stock market is widely available to people, where it has outperformed global stock markets, or stock markets from around the world, because of the position that the U.S. has enjoyed over the last 100 years. And that is not guaranteed to last forever. Although, I think we're still, I'm still bullish on the U.S. stock market. It's still going to go up. That FIRE strategy using the stock market index is still going to perform very well. But as we all know, everything goes towards zero versus Bitcoin. And so, I'm advocating for people to consider, in the FIRE community, consider some type of allocation to Bitcoin, and then learn about it, right?
So is that primarily what your newsletter is directed towards, like that community, but it's incorporating Bitcoin?
Yeah, the kind of tagline that I have is teaching Bitcoiners about financial independence and FIRE practitioners about Bitcoin. Right? So kind of giving a little bit of a nod to both and bringing those together. But
I love that. I felt like that, man, there's this group that should naturally understand the value of
absolutely,
this pristine collateral new system, but they're just so stuck in this
the inspiration for the newsletter was a post that I made back in, I think it was March of 23, called Bitcoin is FIRE friendly. And the point that I was making here is that Bitcoin is perfect tool for a FIRE practitioner, that the FIRE community recognizes intuitively all of the same problems that you and I see very explicitly because we've studied it, that the money is broken, that your cost of living is going to continually rise, and that the way to hedge against that, well, it's not really a risk if it's a certainty, but the way to address that problem is to save and invest your money. And so they intuitively recognize all of those problems and the way that they approach it is very similar to the way that we think about things. It's just that they haven't spent the time to actually understand the fact that they intuitively understand this, if that makes any sense.
No, that totally makes sense.
Right. And so then the rest of that post is laying the case for why, as a FIRE practitioner, you should be thinking about Bitcoin. And then one other point that I want to just make on this particular topic is that we're sitting in El Salvador, and you tell me if my hunch is wrong here, but I doubt that the Salvadoran people have a large amount of access to the U.S. stock market,
almost
or
zero.
Any stock market at all.
No.
And so the FIRE community takes a very U.S. centric view of this, but there's a whole world out there of 8 billion people, and only 330 million of those live in the U.S., and the rest of the world may not have access to the U.S. stock market or any stock market at all. And so you can't, for those people, you need some type of tool that can give you access to savings technology that is more globally available and permissionless in nature. And Bitcoin solves that problem for so many other people, even if you don't find it as valuable for you in your kind of privileged situation there in the U.S.
No, that's 100%. And I mean, El Salvador, they actually were better off than most because they were using the U.S. dollar. So at least their currency was not debasing as fast as,
That's right.
Most of the world's currencies are. But even here, you'd see people, if they would have extra money, they'd go out and buy a bunch of block because they knew eventually they wanted to add on to their house and the block would cost more by the time they got around it. So that was their way of saving.
That's fascinating.
And, that's not very motivating to save when that's your, but when they can know that they can save in Bitcoin and that it's actually going to increase in buying power over time, that they'll be able to trade it for something more valuable in the future, that puts them into that saving mindset. Where before it was kind of hard to get people excited about saving because they're like, best case scenario, I'm treading water. So
what have you seen in terms of the trends around here for people adopting Bitcoin a little bit more readily as a savings technology? Do people feel like they have excess savings that they can actually keep in Bitcoin over time? Or like what is the dynamic at this point versus where it was 5 years ago when you kind of were kicking everything off here?
So that was the surprising thing. When we started, everybody we talked to would say like, hey, I can't save, I'm barely keeping my head above water. And you look at it and the minimum salary is like $360 a month. And it's not that cheap to live here. I mean, it's a little cheaper than the US, but relative to the salary, it's very hard for these people to survive. And so you could understand that. But what we saw is when they started interacting with Bitcoin, they would make little changes in their life of like, I don't want to spend my sats on that extra Coca-Cola or that little toy or that, I'm going to save that instead, because they saw that over time, this would go up in value and that deferred gratification would pay off. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice this now so in the future I can have this. And we saw people all of a sudden, especially in up markets where they're saving, and then that encourages them to save more, and they would have all of a sudden be able to have enough to replace the roof on their house, or to, send their kid to a private school versus the public schools, which are improving now, but have historically been very bad. And so you would see it started this culture of savings for the first time. And so I think 10 years from now, you're really going to see the fruit from that. It takes, these things are generational changes, but I think in 10 years, you'll be surprised at how El Salvador goes from kind of a spending nation to a saving nation and kind of develops that deeper capital structure. So I 100% agree with you that that's something that most Americans don't get, because for them it's like, oh, you can go in the stock market, and I kind of had given up on even speaking into the FIRE community. Well, I got kicked out of a couple Facebook groups just for innocuous posts. I wasn't like being obnoxious, like, hey, you should look at Bitcoin, and they're like, kicked out. And it was like, all right, I guess, but I love that you're doing a newsletter and kind of bringing those communities together.
Yeah, it's been fun to talk about it, and pretty popular, and, gaining readership. So it's fairly new, like in the last, few months or so, but, so we'll see how that plays out. But
I don't know, are there any conferences in that space? Like, and if there are, have you ever spoken at any?
There are. I have not.
Okay.
I have reached out to a couple of the podcasts trying to, kind of shill myself as a guest there to come talk about it. And I feel like so that was in the past when, kind of before this bull run has kicked off again. So maybe now is a better time to start reaching out to those people. I'll see if I can find the time to do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. Well, I took us down a rabbit hole there, but getting back to the product. So you guys have the what I'm blanking right now.
We have the commercial Bitcoin-backed loans that you started with. We have a custody product,
the custody
which
product,
is really kind of like
but also is a being able to make sure you're protecting your heirs and being able to pass on.
Yep.
And then what other things do you guys offer?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, everything is built on this collaborative custody model. Our clients can buy and sell Bitcoin directly with us in the U.S., and that's a really cool experience where it's at this point in time meant for larger purchases, but you can wire in the funds and you'll have a cash balance there that you can draw down on. And we settle the Bitcoin directly into your Unchained vault. So you don't have to go to, Coinbase or River or any of these other places that you can buy Bitcoin and purchase it there, pay probably, similar fees or maybe higher fees, and then manually withdraw the Bitcoin. You can just purchase it directly with us, and we'll drop it into your vault there within 1 to 2 business days. It's a very quick type of process.
And is it just they wire the funds in, or do you guys receive stable coins also, or what's the incoming?
We don't mess with any kind of alternative crypto, so to speak. The only other alternative that we're working with is the US dollar.
Okay.
So people are wiring in funds, like
Yeah.
wiring in actual dollars.
And when people receive loans, they're actually
When they
receiving a
receive
wire
loans,
to their bank
they're
account.
receiving a wire to the bank account.
And do you ever have issues with them, the banks rejecting that or not wanting to receive it because it's coming from a Bitcoin company?
So receiving funds, I
Yeah,
haven't
like
really
the bank
heard.
rejecting the wire coming in, or
Receiving funds, I haven't really heard of
Okay.
that. Sending funds for the purposes of trading, we definitely have seen some of that, right? Like sometimes, our clients will go to the bank and be like, "Hey, I'm wiring in $50,000," and they're like, "Oh, no, you're not," and then they've got to go through a process of, justifying it or whatever,
Yeah.
which typically can be worked out, but obviously it's a pain and just highlights the
that it's not your
use
money
case
when the
and
bank has it.
value
Yeah.
of Bitcoin, right? Like this is actual money that you control. Which is the whole point that they're buying Bitcoin in the first place.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the trade, something that is unique to the way that we do this is that you sell Bitcoin directly from your vault as well. And what that means is that you're able to hold on to the Bitcoin and be in full control of it until the millisecond that you execute the sale transaction. And only at that point in time does the Bitcoin get sent to us into our trading desk as part of that sale transaction. So contrast that to you're sending Bitcoin to an exchange. You've got to send it there first. You've got to wait for a confirmation there. And then you can execute the trade. And during that whole time, you do have counterparty risk there. It might be very small for that certain period of time, but you do have some counterparty risk there. Whereas with Unchained, like you are executing the trade and sending the Bitcoin in the same instant, which I think is really cool and unique. Beyond the trading desk, we have Bitcoin IRAs as well, and so that's a very popular product that's brought a lot of clients with us.
I'm curious to talk to you about that product because in the past, so I'm not sure if this is still the case. Do you actually have to set up? What do they call it? We have to set up a corporation, and it's a whole.
Yeah, you're referring to a self-directed or a checkbook IRA.
Yes. Do you have to set up a self-directed? Because I remember looking into it early on, and I started the process, but it was like, now you got this whole other corporation you got to control, and if you don't file things right, you could run afoul, and I was like.
This is a standard IRA. It is not self-directed or checkbook IRA, which means you don't have this separate entity or anything like that. It operates pretty much exactly the same as any other IRA that you would have at like a traditional financial institution like a Fidelity or a TD Ameritrade or Charles Schwab. With the key difference, of course, that it is Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, and that you can hold keys in that collaborative custody for that Bitcoin and directly control it. So no, you don't have this like checkbook infrastructure and all of that extra overhead that's associated with that. It's just very clean and a good way to maintain the benefits of a tax advantaged account that is available there
Without complicating your life.
And exactly right. And own real Bitcoin with keys that you control. It's a unique product in that regard.
And how long have you guys had that product?
Oh, it's close to 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
If we haven't surpassed 3 years already. It was launched shortly, I think shortly after I joined Unchained, which was in August of 21. So yeah, it's been a few years now.
When I first went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and that was primarily, most of the funds that I had was in IRA or a solo 401k that I had. And
a lot of people
So I wound up in the GBT, drama.
Yeah.
And
a lot of people have a very substantial amount of their wealth tied up in retirement accounts, right?
Well, I wish that would have existed back then.
Yeah,
so I'm glad to know that it does now. I kind of like given up on it because like I said, I looked into it and the self-directed IRA was it just looked like too much of a hassle.
Yeah.
But,
a lot of people find us for that Bitcoin IRA and they come in and they set that and they're transferring in and an IRA that's already set up, or they've got an old 401k from a previous employer that they want to roll in. And then typically speaking, those people also already own Bitcoin in their personal name, like outside of this tax advantage account. And so they'll set up a personal account and build a vault there. And, there's a lot of cross-pollination that happens just from the natural fact that people have different different contexts with which they own Bitcoin. They've got these retirement accounts. They've got a personal Bitcoin that they own. They might have a business that has a Bitcoin treasury, and we have a lot of business clients.
That's what I was going to ask you
as
next.
well.
Are you seeing that as something that's growing? As
Yeah.
Obviously, MicroStrategy and Mike Saylor kind of made that popular, but I think there's been a lot of Bitcoiners, that obviously don't have that size of stack, but have been thinking about that with their small businesses. And so, are you guys seeing that? And what are the challenges that businesses face with the treasuries, as far as thinking about who's custodying them and the tax implications and those sorts of things?
Yeah, every business is different, and they have different organizational or governance structures associated with that. So we take a very consultative approach with those clients to make sure that we're helping them set up a custody solution. It's still using 2 of 3, but we have some other tools that we can kind of wrap around that to provide the level of control mechanisms and visibility and transparency and auditability into the process, so that a organization that's a little bit bigger and has more people involved has that level of control that they need. And in some cases, that means working with auditors that are auditing those companies, or working with regulatory bodies who are asking questions about what this custody model looks like. When you start getting into the size of company that MicroStrategy is and some of the larger public companies, we're still early in that journey, I think, for people to start wanting to bring a lot of their custody in-house. And a lot of that is driven from the regulatory environment, from the auditors' perhaps lack of understanding of Bitcoin 1, Bitcoin custody 2, multi-signature, and all of the native properties that Bitcoin has, and just not necessarily seeing the value, or it's just creating more work or headaches for them, as opposed to just saying, no, you need qualified custody at Coinbase because we've worked with people with Coinbase and we understand exactly what's going on there, and they can just give us reports in a way that fits into our model of doing things. Now, does that change over time for larger companies? I think it does. I think there's going to be a range of custody models that larger companies are employing, and some of them are going to choose, some of them already do, but some of them are going to choose to hold Bitcoin themselves in a collaborative custody type manner. And I don't want it to happen, but I have a hunch that at some point in the next 5 years or whatever it might be, there might be some scares out there in terms of the actual custody of the Bitcoin and the traditional way of doing so in the traditional or corporate world of just trusting some financial institution to hold your Bitcoin for you. The minute that there are questions that are popping up or scares in that regard is going to be a turning point for people to start thinking about things a little bit differently, and we'll certainly be ready for that. In the meantime, we work with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses who have a much tighter control infrastructure in terms of their governance, and people who are typically like Bitcoiners like you and me, who really understand the value proposition and understand the value of holding your own keys and want to keep that within that organization, and then access all the other financial tools that we've got.
Yeah. So I definitely understand the extra level of safety that comes from having the multi-sig setup. What does it expose Bitcoiners to as far as now you have a different attack vector, say the government wants their funds, or they've been named in a lawsuit or something like that, where if they're self-custodying and nobody knows they have that, they have a little bit more way to circumvent things. And I'm assuming that you guys are obligated, if the government comes to you and says, hey, you need to surrender the keys for these funds.
Well, we don't have the keys to those funds. We have our key.
You have your key.
We are required to collect a certain minimal amount of information about our clients as a regulated financial institution, and under a valid court order for a particular individual, we would be forced to comply with that. So there is a trade-off.
So it would only be in a situation where they've put up their funds as collateral, where you guys would have
the keys, enough of the keys to be able to access the funds.
Even in that regard, there still are 3 keys with 3 different parties involved. The legal title to the Bitcoin stays with our client and their entity. So it doesn't transfer to us or someone else as part of that loan process, which means that the legal order, I'm assuming, and I'm take this with a grain of salt, I'm no attorney, would need to involve that client, and they would need to be served with that subpoena. When you are borrowing against your Bitcoin, you are giving up unilateral control over it, right? Like, let's not, mince words about that. And there's no other way really to do that. But in the pure custody model, you do have full unilateral control if you're controlling 2 out of the 3 of those keys. There is a privacy trade-off involved in using any service provider like Unchained, and you're trusting us with some of that private information and information about your holdings and your transaction history, which we obviously go to great pains to protect.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there's a 0% chance that could be leaked or have some type of attack there, or that the government could come to us and ask for Mike's information about his Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so at least you have an option there, right?
No, definitely.
You're getting all of the benefits of collaborative custody. For the vast majority of people, like, they lose their Bitcoin because they made a mistake.
Yeah.
And we are there as professional services firm to get you very comfortable with the way this custody model works, to act as a recovery mechanism for you, to make sure that you've got that succession plan taken care of, and solve this like much greater risk that most people have.
No, 100%. Yeah, I was just trying to think of, there's always trade-offs and things.
There's trade-offs to everything. You can't get around it, right? You can't get around it.
So besides you have the lending product, you have the custodial product, you have the IRA, the business
trading,
product, the trading. Is that pretty much encompass what you guys are doing, or is there other products that you guys have?
Yeah, so that pretty much encompasses it. We are working very hard to expand the dollar side of the services that we provide. And so there'll be a lot more to come in terms of announcements in 2025 as to some of the products that we're going to be building and supporting there. But that will allow for people to bring more of their financial wherewithal to Unchained and help us to kind of bridge that gap between the fiat world and the Bitcoin world in a much more seamless way for our clients. So there'll be a lot of interesting stuff, I think, that we'll be able to announce, over the next 12 months or so.
So couple questions I have, and maybe the stuff you guys working on and you can't talk about, but just the idea, things I've thought about in the past. Like, has there ever been an idea to do a mortgage product that basically is secured with the title to the home, but also with a portion of Bitcoin that just takes some of the risk from the lender? Say the property price drops in half, they default in something, they have a little bit more security, where you kind of have a hybrid model where you could get more of that traditional mortgage rate, but it should even be safer from the bank's perspective because they have that Bitcoin sitting on top of it.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of consideration to that. I think for now, we haven't seen or haven't done the due diligence enough to understand what the market demand actually is for that. Like, it sounds good to me on the surface. There certainly would be a different type of operational structure that we need to put in place, different compliance requirements and that kind of thing, because now all of a sudden, if you're entering the mortgage market, you are doing underwriting on people and all of that stuff. So then the question becomes, okay, are you hiring that underwriting piece out? Are you doing it in-house? Like,
little earthquake here.
Ooh. There we go. That was nice.
We're rocking and rolling.
What did I say? So anyway, there's a lot of those considerations that would need to come into play if we were to go down that road. I think we have other priorities at the moment, but Andrew Hones and Battery Finance and what they're doing is extremely interesting. And they just closed their first deal. I don't know if you're familiar with
had
this.
not heard. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. So this was a deal in Philadelphia, as I understand it, for I think it was a residential real estate property. The essence of the deal is that they are refinancing the property to pay off less advantageous debt that's on the property into like a fixed rate product with a kicker of
Oh
extra
yeah, okay,
money
I did. Yeah.
that is
I
used to
did
buy
hear about
Bitcoin,
that.
and it shares up the loan, which I think is really cool. And I've had numerous conversations with Andrew and the battery team about all of that. I'm really excited to see where that goes, and that's somewhat in line with what you're asking about there.
And then what about a Bitcoin denominated life insurance product?
I know there are some companies out there that are fledgling and trying to solve that problem. Perhaps in the future. I don't know that we've ever considered that.
Okay. Well, I'm excited you're here in El Salvador. I won't keep you any longer. You have to make sure you get enough time on the beach out there before golfing tomorrow.
I know. I'm excited to play some golf.
Is there any other things that we didn't cover?
Well, yeah. I don't know that we talked about the actual golf event. We should do that.
Oh yeah, we should. We started to, and I think we got sidetracked. So
yeah. So this Max and Stacy Golf Invitational is really an interesting event, and I think a kind of milestone event for the Bitcoin Sports Network. This group of people who are trying to bring Bitcoiners together through sports and activities. And it was really kicked off from this article that Joe Burnett and Rocky Wold, two Unchained other golfers within the company, and myself put together just as a fun thing that got posted to Bitcoin Magazine and would eventually turn into what this event is after Max Kaiser reached out and said, "Hey, I want to do this event and you guys should run it." And so really looking forward to like playing golf with some Bitcoiners. Like I said, it's my first time in El Salvador. I'm super excited to be here, and it hopefully my dream of melding Bitcoin and golf for my own personal life starts to take on a life of its own, and we start to see some more of these
it's a win-win. You're on a business trip, not a golf trip.
Exactly right.
It's business expense, so it's win-win-win.
Very good.
You hope to make this? Is this going to be a Max and Stacy annual tournament?
I will speak. I'll let them speak for themselves on that. I certainly hope so. I would love to be able to come back next year and do the same thing. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, it's a perfect time of year to have it here. The weather's amazing in January in El Salvador, and the golf course actually sits kind of between the beach and the city, so it's at a little higher elevation, so the weather's even nicer there than it is at the beach, and it's a beautiful course, a beautiful facility.
I'm looking forward to seeing it tomorrow.
And then there's a ton of people that come in that aren't like myself that won't actually be golfing. We're just going to be there to hang out at the pool and have social hour. Yeah,
so. Luckily the club is big enough where you could have all these non-players, and I think the whole club is kind of shut down for this event. Which is really nice, and I think a lot of players have been able to bring their wives or spouses or whatever the case is.
Well, hopefully this will help orange pill everybody else that lives there at the course.
Yeah, it certainly can't hurt.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Mike.
How can people sign up for your newsletter? Follow you? Any other things that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, the newsletter is called Fire BTC. So it's Fire BTC.
I'm gonna sign up.
I'm very interested. I appreciate that. Yeah. So firebtc.substack.com.
Okay.
And you can find it on my Twitter profile as well, or X profile, which is at @TS_HODL, HODL. Go to unchained.com and check out our website. If you have any questions, we have a free consultation button there. You can click that and find some time to talk to, depending on where you're at, either myself or somebody else on our sales team. And then, check out it's maxandstacyinvitational.com, I think is the URL, just to see what we're doing here, right? You may not have been able to make it, this year, but next year, who knows what might happen.
And I think they have a Twitter handle that's similar too.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Max and Stacy Invitational, I think, is
Yeah.
is the Twitter handle. So I appreciate you having me here. It's a beautiful place you've got. I'm so excited to be here.
You
in
got to
El
bring the
Salvador.
family next time.
I will bring the family next time.
They're going to see the pictures and they'll be like, "What? You left us behind in the snow?"
I
And,
know. You know what? It's already been an issue. So
well, now that you've seen it and how beautiful it is, you'll feel good bringing them back here.
Absolutely.
And, the kids will love it. I mean,
Absolutely.
everybody who brings their kids down, they just have an amazing time.
yeah,
So,
sounds like a plan.
yeah. All right. Thanks, Trey.
Thanks, Mike.